This review covers Tom the Mongoose McEwen's rear engine dragster kit. It's a 1/24 scale kit from Atlantis models number M7529. Atlantis has done it again by rescuing this model from the scrap heap and re-released it in 2024. It hasn't been seen in decades. It's not for the average builder, but with some forehand knowledge, you can put this model on your shelf. Now, Tom the Mongoose McEwen was half of a tag team with Don the Snake Prudhomme, who have been called the greatest rivalry in drag racing. Known for Tom's endless promotion, it was a stroke of marketing genius to get Mattel's Hot Wheels as a sponsor into the sport, putting dragsters into the hands of every boy in America. Now, this kit includes over 100 parts molded in white with chrome-plated pieces, vinyl drag slicks, fuel lines, and water slide decals and instructions. When you're done, the dragster measures about 10 1/4 inches long, 2.5 inches wide, and 2.5 inches high. Now, the Christmas tree is 3 3/4 inches tall, and the standing figure almost 3 inches tall itself. Here's a look at the box art, and the kit itself has a number of highlights aside from just the dragster itself. It's got a great decal sheet, and it's got a standing attendant as well as driver figures. Now, it's also comes with a staging tree and some really big drag slicks for show and go, along with a one-piece frame, which makes assembly a lot easier. The only issue is that the kit supplied vinyl plumbing for the ignition, or for the ignition, fuel, and oil lines are a little too stiff and need a little help. I'll show you how to fix that, and you can make a brand new old school dragster for your display shelf. Here are the decals. They come off the paper nicely after just a little bit of soaking, and they're flexible, so they contour to all of the features on the body, and they stick pretty well. Now, as you can see here, there's a lot of them, and they're very colorful, and you'll use every one of them on the livery that's presented here on the box art. Here you see the contents of the kit, and as you'll notice, the parts are relatively flash-free. That large vinyl sprue up there is the issue that I talk about, but it's manageable if you do some things to it. Also, it's a nicely chromed parts tree, but the dragsters generally don't have chrome parts, so we'll talk about that later. The Christmas tree is in a few pieces, goes together well. It just needs to be decorated. And the standing figure is just 2 halves. You simply glue that together and clean up the seam with some putty, and you're ready to go. Now, as you can see, the finishing is what makes these figures, stand out. And as in this case, the sponsor there from Atlantis came to watch the investment they had made, and the attendant's name is Doug, which is pretty easy for me to remember. And anyway, once you finish these off, they look very nice. The driver figure, as you see here, is painted a bright aluminum for the heat-resistant, flame-resistant suit, along with he's got some harness belts there that were picked out in red, and of course the helmet is painted white with a black insert there for the lens. And his left hand is the drive hand, and you'll position that after he goes in. Right here it's staged up with a little sticky putty. The first thing that I did was use some CA glue to attach the front axle to the frame, and I do that for strength, to make sure that axle is attached really well, and so it doesn't come off or drop the wheels or any other issues regarding that. Then I gave all the parts a coat of flat white, and the frame was painted with a true blue color. So after the primer had dried, I tested it out on a spoon, the old spoon test, and I used the paint from an aerosol can from Krylon, and it was beautiful. But the plastic in this kit seems to react a little bit with the aerosol cans, so I ended up having to decant that and put it into an airbrush. As I had mentioned earlier, you see here the chrome tree that was stripped of chrome. I had put that into a container and then sprayed some Easy Off oven cleaner on it to remove the chrome and the underlying base coat. And then I painted it with some flat aluminum. Next, I assembled the rear wheels and the rear part suspension, basically, for this model. And of course, like I said, they had been painted aluminum. The tires go together nicely. The inner wheels that go on the back side, or tire portions, they glue in with some CA glue, and they fit very nicely. You can scuff the tread area, so to speak, and get rid of that center line mostly, and give it a nice worn look, like it spun the tires a couple of times. Then it all assembles nice and easy, and then you put the attach the frame to the rear end there. You see there's the frame in the True Blue, and it makes for a pretty sturdy back end. Also, make sure that you scrape any paint or chrome that you want to use to adhere the parts together, or they won't stick. So here are the parts that are used to construct the majority of the engine, except for the fuel lines, etc. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But go ahead and gather these up and assemble them and stage them for construction. After I had built the main block and heads, I test fitted the, I'm going to call it a spider web, which is supposed to represent the magneto with the ignition wires on it. However, they don't bend in any form of realism, and they're going to be difficult to conform to where they should be prior to installation. So that means you're trying to manipulate them after that. It just didn't work. So I decided to replace that with a set of aftermarket wires from a distributor kit, but we're going to convert that, into a magneto for the Dragster engine. And here is a look at the basic block painted black. Most of them were flat black, coming from the aftermarket. And this is an Ed Pink engine, and it's a real nice representation. You see, I also drilled out the place for the seals for the ignition wires. And so here's that vinyl fuel line. And it does work, but you'll have to do some manipulation with it. First off, of course, scrape any paint away, and I used super glue to mount the parts. Look at the orientation here of the lower half of the intake, and then you can see that your harness goes out to the right. But lay it in there, and it goes in there nicely, and glue it into place. As you see here, to make sure that it is stable and can't come out. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time here to show you how this is assembled, because it's really kind of a main point of the kit. And as you can see, now you glue the blower, which by the way has got a gold tint to it, and then you wind that up around and put the smaller fuel line section on top of the blower and glue that into position, and then the butterfly catcher is glued in over the top of that. And now we can mount the post that's on the lines up into the left side of the blower bug catcher there. That is super glued right into a hole there, and it extends out forward towards the front of the car, of the vehicle. So from behind here, you can see the white arrow pointing downwards is where that post goes into the side of the bug catcher, and just below that, to the center, a circle around a supposed to be a hanger for the upper planary system there. You see the planary system, one stacked below the blower body and one stacked above it, and it's supposed to, you're supposed to hang the upper one on top of that. I found that really distorted those fuel lines, so I'm going to clip that off later. Now the arrow down to the middle of the blower is a hole where the lower planary system is supposed to be plugged into there's a little, peg there, but that also wouldn't reach. It distorted it. The plastic is too stiff. So where that red line is pointing between the two is where I'm going to add a little pipe to the union to get that fuel line whole and correct and usable without distorting the whole thing. So in this graphic, you see that the top arrow there, the red one, shows that I clipped off and smoothed off that hanger and painted that with a silver Sharpie, which reminds me, that's what you're going to do to all the fuel lines here shortly. Paint doesn't go well with these vinyl parts. As I mentioned, I bent a little piece of coated wire and I installed that into the hole in the back of the blower down to the union for the fuel lines there to make the system correct. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit here. As you see, most of the engine is complete and we're using it to mock up the fuel lines. The red lines there show the direction and travel that the fuel lines will have to take. It goes out over around the engine, down underneath the frame, up through a hole, and then into the fuel cell. You can also see that we have added the wires and made a suitable looking magneto and cut the old one off, of course, before, and just glued this one into position and ran the wires into the the seals there, the ignition wires into the seals on top of the valve covers. And so here's the secret to this build. The fuel lines that are mounted on the front of the engine below the blower belt there, they don't go just straight down. Once again, they're not flexible enough. Use a heat source, like a candle. You can hold both ends of the wire and over a heat source and bend those lines to the appropriate position down across the motor, down through the frame. Then I marked in forward there just as they would come out, and I bent them towards the front end so that they would be nice and level underneath the frame, ready to come up through that hole into the fuel tank. Once they're heated up and bent into position and cooled off, they'll stay there. Now here you also see the oil lines that go into the engine, the oil pump there, and also into the sump, the oil pan. And once again, these are all just kind of painted with a silver Sharpie. It's not paint, so it won't flake off. The arrows indicate the mounting points, where all of these things are added, and use some super glue and accelerant to lock them into position. And so here's what your engine will look like with the oil and fuel lines attached and bent into the appropriate direction for installation into the frame. Now you can add the engine to the frame and route the wires appropriately. And the engine just mounts at the front of the bell housing and back. It just mounts onto notches on the frame. So use some strong glue and scrape the paint there to get a good bond. We'll also be installing the rest of these pieces, and it'll be important to put the side ailerons there in place before you put the seat in later. The fuel tank and the other parts, the pedals, etc., they'll be going into position too. And notice the firewall there that goes between the fuel tank and the driver. In fact, you see the little white marks at the bottom of this. That's actually the top. It's a little too tall for body clearance. So you're going to want to sand that down a little bit to make sure that the body will set flush on top of the frame. With the engine in place and the fuel lines routed, there's one more thing to do. Use some super glue, scrape the paint off there at that floor plate, run the wires or lines up through the hole, and then super glue that crossbar that connects the fuel lines together up at the top there, and glue it flush to the bottom of the plate to keep that in position. Now that we've got that major issue resolved, we can continue with the build. The aileron there gets some decals. In itself, it's black, and then it gets the Wins and Coca-Cola decals. The seat for the driver is flat black, and of course the frame parts are blue just like the rest of the frame. There's a Mongoose decal that goes on the helmet of the driver, and he's gotten a little black wash there to accentuate the creases. Also the armor plate there, that's painted steel color, and it gets glued to a tab in the back of the canopy frame there. So slide the driver in with some glue on the back side, keep him in position, and that assembly goes in after you've manipulated your wing through the frame and into position on the C-clips of the frame. After gluing the canopy frame into position, you're going to want to touch it up with a little blue paint where the frame parts come together. And now you can see what a nice looking engine this is. The headers have got a little relief on the ends, and those were deepened a little bit and then added some black for exhaust look. And then of course all the detailing you see here on the engine, there's 10 decals just for the engine, so it looks really nice with the magneto in place. And I used blue wires because I couldn't find any of actual photos of this rail with yellow wires. The centers of the wings are painted the same color as the body, and now we're going to add the decals to everything. And I've even got some, you see that white semicircle up there, those are some Goodyear decals for the slicks. And you're going to use all of the decals on this model. As you can see, some of them even go on the staging tree there. And there the tires are with Goodyear slicks. And once again, the prominent Coca-Cola on the wings. The body is just chock full of sponsored decals. It looks terrific and really highlights the support that the Mongoose got. The tires for the front, they're pretty nice. They got a little tread on them, but they also, there's like an inside and an outside. One side looks better with a little convex finish to the outside. So, turn those around the way you like them and glue the wheels together and then just sandwich them. After you've put the tires on the outside, they'll just stay right there. Now back to the front end here, we're going to add the tie rods, and they butt up against the axle there and up towards the front, and then you see in the back towards the top of this photo, they fit into some notches there right where the frame halves come together. Then the lower ones just hang there. They don't go. There's nothing for them to go into, and despite the instructions, but that's okay because you're going to slide the tie rod through there, and then you're going to bring it up and put the tie rod on the little ends there outside of the front wheels, just where you see the smaller circles. Those get glued there, and then you can glue the center one just in front of to the steering shaft. That's the steering box right there. So that's how I did it, and it made sense to me. Add the windshield to the top of the body shell there, and then we're going to add the wing to the back. And the way I did that was to construct the frame for the wing, the uprights there first, by gluing them together into the notches on the back of the frame, and then I just set the wing onto the tops of those, just making sure that they aligned up into the little slots that are provided for it. Here are the parts that are left over for the kit. Obviously, there's a different drop axle, tie rod, and front wing, along with some different radius rods, etc. These are parts that are left over, probably belong to different versions of this kit. Well, there you have it. Your model is done, and it is a striking looking reminder of the golden and the glory days of drag racing. Just after they started putting the engine on the backside as a safety feature and also for better traction against the wheels, it just made more sense. But it took a while for the evolution to occur, and the different things that were pioneered back then are still basic to drag racing today, even though they go a lot faster. But nonetheless, if you love old dragsters, if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf.
Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.